Professor Chen waved his hands repeatedly. Don't open it. This joint burial coffin of the two princes and their wives from the Gumo kingdom is a national treasure. Currently, we don't have the necessary conditions, and the circumstances are not suitable. Opening it now would damage the sealed coffin and the artifacts inside. The purpose of our trip this time is to submit an assessment report to our superiors, request permission for excavation, or seek protection for these ancient civilization relics. When we return, I'll have Ai Kwok instruct Chu Keen and the others to do a good job with the records, and I will personally write the report. It seemed I wouldn't have the chance to see what was inside this coffin. Although I knew the professor was right, I couldn't help but feel disappointed as I climbed with them to the sacrificial chamber on the upper floor. The stone door of the sacrificial chamber had originally been sealed with many animal hides, but we had torn them apart with shovels. Professor Chen said this layer of hide was used to keep the sacrificial chamber dry and separate it from the moisture of the holy well. The ancient Gumo people would lead livestock into the chamber, slaughter them, then immediately skin them and paste the still bloody warm hides onto the gaps of the stone door. The meat and organs of the cattle and goats were completely cut away, leaving only the bones. The stone door would only be open for the next sacrifice. This ritual of slaughtering livestock, skinning them, scraping their bones, and tying dried corpses to wooden pillars was to preserve the holy well's water source, ensuring it would never dry up. Ancient desert dwellers believed that the soul of life came from divine water. In some ways, this was quite similar to Darwin's theory of the origin of life. We couldn't reuse those animal hides to seal the door gaps. Besides the camels, there were no other large animals around. But our 19 camels were incredibly precious. We couldn't skin them to seal the door. We had to use several layers of tape instead. The archaeological team rested in Shiyi City for 3 full days, then began their journey south, finally entering the sea of sand that the locals called the Black Desert. Here, there were no more desert poplars, nor any undulating sand dunes. The sand mounds around were almost uniformly flat, like flattened steamed buns, vast and boundless. No matter which angle or direction one looked, the landscape was the same, without any trace of life. I asked old Anlaman if he had ever entered this desert region before. The old man gave a forced smile and replied, "This is the hell of yellow sand. Even old man Hutai wouldn't want to come here. As for me, I've only been through it once, and this is that time. If it weren't for you officials and Hutai's beloved white camel, I wouldn't come here even if I died 100 times over." Complaints aside, Anlaman was still known as a living map of the desert, and not without reason. The desert was as familiar to him as arranging pots and pans was to a woman. Although this was also his first time entering this forbidden black desert, his fox sharp eyes could still spot clumps of weeds and thorny apple trees in the sand hollows. Relying on these plants, along with his many years of experience wandering the desert, he was able to guide the archaeological team forward. The desert contains China's largest water system, but water systems like the Tarim River flow hidden beneath the sand. On the surface, it's a barren desert, but deep underground, there might be a raging underground river. Some plant species that grow in the desert rely on a little moisture rising from underground springs, stubbornly striving to survive. In fact, besides a few plants, there are also many animals here, but most of them only come out to forage during the cold nights. During the Han Dynasty and even earlier, the Taklamakan was called the Ancient Garden. At that time, desertification here was not yet severe, and rivers had not yet sunk underground. Everywhere were oases with towns, fortresses, temples, and post stations. Countless merchant caravans carried silk, spices, and tea leaves back and forth through this region. By the Yuan Dynasty, the Italian Marco Polo even traveled along this route with a merchant caravan to the Central Plains. By the Ming Dynasty, the Ottoman Empire, straddling Eurasia, rose to power. War obstructed trade routes between Asia and Europe. That era was the age of the sea. Navigators opened new routes, and the main trade shifted from land to ocean. This great era was also called the Age of Great Geographical Discoveries. Coupled with increasingly severe desert encroachment, the harsh living environment caused the collapse of all the small and large nations in the desert. The prosperity and glory of yesteryear were taken away by God. The Black Desert was the first place abandoned by the gods. Its civilization ended by the Jin dynasty, and to this day, the Black Desert remains shrouded in the gloomy atmosphere of death. On the first day of departure, we encountered endless sand winds. The sky was pale yellow, but the wind wasn't strong. It perfectly obscured the sun, allowing us to travel quickly during the day. Shirley Yang held the notebook left by the English explorer, discussing the route with old Anlaman as they walked. The notebook stated that after leaving Shiyi City, the explorers had discovered a nearby area with many stone tombs. They intended to excavate them upon their return, so the notebook contained detailed maps of the route. Old Anlaman's experience combined with Shirley Yang's notebook, although not allowing for precise positioning, greatly helped us with distance and direction. In the evening, when setting up camp, old Anlaman found a raised area. Everyone built a sand-blocking wall on the mound, arranged the camels, and then lit a fire for warmth on the wind-sheltered side of the dune. Today's journey was arduous. Although the wind wasn't strong, it made everyone restless. Old Anlaman grumbled that it was the windy season, and in the desert, this kind of weather occurred on average every 2 days. When there was no wind, the scorching sun would dry up the last drop of water on a traveler. Fadi Qian said, "A little heat is good, sweating helps lose weight, and a bit of sunbathing is nice. But with this constant wind, I can't say a word along the way. It's so boring I could die." Old Anlaman told him he didn't understand anything. This was only the edge of the desert. It would take another 5 days to truly enter its depths. Although I had never been there, I knew some friends who had passed through. They were all lucky survivors who returned from that Black Desert. The terrifying aspect of the Black Desert wasn't the quicksand that swallowed people, nor the metal-eating ants that could devour a car, nor the black sandstorms. Legend has it that deep within this desert lies a dreamlike land. People who enter it will see lakes, rivers, beautiful women, divine beasts, snow-capped mountains, and oases. Those who are thirsty and tired will obviously rush to follow these beautiful sights, but they will never reach them, even if they die from exhaustion and thirst. In reality, these are all traps of devils, luring people to their deaths. But Hu Tai will bless us, Allahu Akbar. Shirley Yang said, "What they see might be an illusion." Uninformed people are indeed very easily enchanted. While talking, Yi Yixin ran over and pulled Shirley Yang aside. The two whispered a few words, then Shirley Yang turned back and told me, "We're going behind the sand dune for a bit." I knew Yi Yixin probably wanted to go to the toilet, and being timid, she didn't dare go alone, so she pulled Shirley Yang along. I nodded and instructed, "Bring a flashlight and a whistle. If anything happens, blow it hard. Go quickly and come back quickly." Shirley Yang hummed in acknowledgement, then she and Yi Yixin walked hand in hand behind a nearby sand dune. Fadi Qian asked me if I still had alcohol. I told him it was all gone. Even a barrel of white wine wouldn't be enough for his greedy mouth. Drink a few sips of hot water and go to sleep quickly. If we don't find a water source in another 5 or 6 days, everyone's daily water ration will have to be cut. I only said that to scare Fadi Qian. Even if we couldn't find an underground river in the desert, I still had a way to ensure everyone had a minimum amount of drinking water. But it was a last resort, very troublesome but indeed effective. I had learned this desert survival method back in the army. Old Anlaman initially refused to enter the Black Desert, the main reason being that it had no fresh water. Although there were underground rivers, it was fundamentally impossible to dig that deep. If one dug down a few meters from the roots of a saxal plant, a type of desert grass, there would only be damp sand and salty water, which would make one even thirstier. Old Anlaman also knew this method. He and I had discussed its feasibility many times and implicitly agreed that if we reached a place where even saxal plants couldn't grow, we wouldn't take another step. Only then did he agree. Soldiers trained for desert survival all knew that beneath the deep sand layers of the Xinjiang desert, there was much saline water with high mineral content. By digging under the roots of desert plants, one could obtain damp sand and salty water. Using a simple solar distillation method and then filtering it would yield a small amount of fresh water. Though little, it was enough to sustain life. At this moment, the sand wind blew stronger. Suddenly, a whistle shrieked from behind the opposite sand dune. Everyone was startled, quickly grabbing their entrenching shovels and air guns, and ran straight to the scene of the incident. Fortunately, the spot was close, less than 200 paces away. Running 3 steps as 2, they reached the place in an instant. They saw Yi Yixin half submerged in the sand, struggling constantly. Shirley Yang was tightly gripping her arm, desperately pulling her out. In the commotion, someone shouted, "Quicksand!" We rushed forward, following the footprints in the sand, trying with all our might to pull Yi Yixin back. Some people didn't have time to find ropes, so they took off their belts, intending to tie them to her arm. Unexpectedly, it didn't take much effort to pull Yi Yixin up. It seemed it wasn't quicksand after all. Yi Yixin, overcome with fear, threw herself into Shirley Yang's arms, sobbing. Everyone quickly asked what had happened and if it was quicksand. Shirley Yang, while comforting Yi Yixin, recounted, "As soon as we went behind the sand dune, Yixin's foot slipped and half her body sank. I quickly gripped her arm and blew the whistle for help. But it doesn't seem to be a quicksand pit. The speed of quicksand engulfment is very fast and the suction force is strong. If it were quicksand, I wouldn't have been able to hold her at all. Besides, Yixin sank halfway and then stopped, as if there was something solid underneath. Otherwise, it would have taken everyone over 10 seconds to hear the signal and rush over. It would have been too late to save her." Yi Yixin had also calmed down, wiping her tears and saying, "It seems I stepped on a large stone slab under the sand. Beneath the slab was a hollow space, and as soon as I put my foot down, I sank straight in." Shirley Yang was surprised. Could it be a stone tomb? "Let's take a look." We used shovels to dig at the spot where Yi Yixin had been stuck. Beneath a not, too thick layer of yellow sand, parallel to the slope of the sand dune, a gently sloping stone wall indeed appeared. On the wall was a large hole, seemingly caused by an explosion. It seemed the explosion hadn't happened long ago, probably within the past few days. The sand wind had covered the mouth of the hole with a thin layer of sand. Yi Yixin had stepped into this hole and gotten stuck there. Everyone gazed at the stone hole, then looked at each other. This was clearly a stone tomb. Had it already been robbed? I examined the rock fragments at the mouth of the hole and the direction of the blast force. A small, precisely directed explosive charge. Having been an engineer soldier for so many years, I felt my skill in using explosives was unrivaled. If I were to blast this stone tomb, it would at most be to this extent. It seemed the tomb blaster was very knowledgeable about the load-bearing properties of the rock. The explosives only broke through the stone wall, scattering all the fragments outwards, without causing any damage whatsoever to the inside of the tomb. Looking at the explosive power, it was definitely not a civilian explosive. Having left the army for several years, could it be that active? Duty soldiers are now rushing to loot tombs? Certainly not. This might be stolen military explosives. Furthermore, in this vast desert, how did those tomb raiders manage to find ancient tombs? The surrounding terrain and geomorphology are completely identical. Could there be other master tomb raiders in this world, besides someone like me with mediocre skills, who know how to read geomancy and celestial stars? The sand mound was gradually cleared. This was an elliptical stone wall. Apart from the blasted face, the other parts were buried deep under the yellow sand. It seemed this was a typical Wei-Jin-era stone tomb. Thick and large mountain stones were built into an arch shape, and the gaps were sealed with carp glue. Such stone tombs were very common in the ancient Shiyi city. In the early 19th century, a European explorer once described it this way: "Stone tombs can be seen everywhere in the desert, large and small, countless. Most of the tombs are buried in yellow sand, with their black peaks exposed, like miniature Egyptian pyramids." Traveling through the desert among these densely packed stone tombs, the sight truly captivated people. Now, these stone tombs were completely buried by the desert, making them very difficult to trace. Professor Chen guessed that perhaps a desert storm a few days ago, with strong winds, had exposed a part of this stone tomb. Unexpectedly, the tomb raiders arrived too quickly. The archaeological team was still a step too late. Along the way, we had seen several ancient tombs damaged by robbers. No wonder Professor Chen was so anxious, risking his old life to enter the desert. If they didn't stop the tomb robbing activities in this region, it was feared that not long from now, nothing would be left. The entrance hole to the tomb was pitch black. Professor Chen, He Kwok and I turned on our flashlights to examine it. The tomb chamber was only equivalent to a small, flat, roofed house. Inside, 4 or 5 coffins were scattered, their lids pried open and damaged, thrown to one side. Everything was dug up and strewn about. There were large and small coffins, seemingly a joint burial tomb. Of the ancient corpses in the coffins, only the mummified remains of a young girl with long braided hair were left. Only her head was relatively intact, her body was completely shattered. The remaining corpses were presumably carried away by the tomb raiders. In ancient tombs in the Xinjiang desert, something as valuable as jewels were the mummified remains within the tombs. I once heard Professor Chen explain that ancient human remains are categorized into several types. Mummies that still contain moisture, such as the female corpse at Ma Wang Mound, wax corpses, a type of specially treated body, frozen corpses preserved in permafrost regions for 10,000 years, embalmed corpses similar to Xianxia, and also stuffed corpses like specimens. Mummies are also divided into several types. Some are formed by placing desiccants like lime or ash into the coffin. Others are like ancient Egyptian mummies, treated with special anti-decomposition techniques. Xinjiang mummies, however, are formed naturally due to being in a special tomb environment with high temperatures, dry heat, and no mold. These mummies, if ancient, are very valuable. Some museums, exhibitions, and overseas collectors eagerly compete to buy them at high prices. Professor Chen saw that the tomb had been completely robbed of its corpses and was also thoroughly ransacked. He sighed endlessly, and then instructed his students to clean up the remaining items in the tomb to see if anything could be salvaged. I worried that the professor might become too agitated for his body to handle, so I advised him to rest early. Professor Chen gave He Kwok a few instructions, telling him to lead people in to meticulously record the situation of the tomb, and then Fatih Qian took him back to camp to rest. The next day, the wind continued unabated, blowing steadily and relentlessly. When the archaeological team set out, Professor Chen sought me out. He said that the tomb discovered last night had been robbed no more than 5 days ago. It was possible that a group of tomb raiders had entered the Black Desert earlier than us. There was no time to delay, it would be best to chase and apprehend them. I casually gave a few vague replies, thinking to myself, let them be. It's best if we don't run into each other. Colleagues are already rivals, let alone those who robbed that stone tomb, who even have military explosives. They might even have powerful weapons. If we encounter them, a bloody fight would be unavoidable. I wouldn't have a problem, but the issue is with the archaeological team. What if someone gets injured or killed? That responsibility would be immense. But then again, in this vast desert, it wouldn't be easy for 2 groups to meet. If we hadn't found this sand dune to be the highest point around last night, we wouldn't have camped here, and certainly wouldn't have found the robbed stone tomb. There wouldn't be a second such coincidence. Perhaps those fellows robbed the corpses and then immediately returned. Over 10 days later, the archaeological team ventured deeper into the desert, finally losing the trace of the Sidhu River. For several consecutive days, they circled the same spot. Sidhu, in the ancient local language, means the shadow, something that cannot be chased or caught. Old Anleman's eyes turned bloodshot, and finally his hands trembled as he said there was no other way. It seemed Hutai only allowed them to go this far. The entire team and the camels were exhausted. No one could take another step. For the past few days, there had been no wind in the desert, and the sun lingered in the sky longer than ever. To conserve drinking water, the team members dug holes in the sand during the day, erected rain-proof tarpaulins overhead, and inhaled the cool moisture from the ground to retain water in their bodies. They only set off at night and early morning, half the journey on camels, half driving vehicle number 11. Moving further ahead, food and water would no longer be sufficient. If they didn't return to the old path in the next 1 or 2 days, they would have to kill and eat the camels on the way back. I looked at the exhausted team, their lips dry and cracked, knowing they were nearing their limits. Seeing the sun rising and the temperature steadily increasing, I had everyone dig holes to rest. After everything was arranged, Shirley Yang found old Anlaman and me to discuss the upcoming route. Shirley Yang said, "Brother Yi, Mr. Anlaman, in the English explorer's notebook I'm holding, it's recorded that the English explorer also lost track of the Sidhu underground river, deep within this black desert. In this deadly sea of sand where not a blade of grass grows, two colossal black mountain ranges stand parallel, catching the twilight sun like two ancient black, armored warriors silently guarding an ancient secret. Passing through the canyon that resembles a great gate, the legendary city then appeared before their eyes.